For this skirt, you will need stitch markers, scissors, a 5mm crochet hook, and measuring tape. You'll also need yarn, and I used about 2 skeins of weight 4 acrylic yarn, which is about 800 yards. To start this skirt, you're going to need 3 measurements: your hip measurement, your waist measurement, and the inches from your waist to the desired skirt length before adding your ruffles. This skirt is worked from the top down, so we're going to start with your waist measurement. In order to get this measurement, you're going to wrap your measuring tape around your body just right above your belly button. And you want it to be comfortable, so don't pull it too tight. For reference, I will be making this skirt in a size small, and my waist measurement is 27 inches. Now, because acrylic yarn is stretchy, I usually make my waistband a little bit smaller than my actual waist size. So what I do is take my waist measurement, which is 27, and I subtract 7 inches from that. So if you want your waistband to stretch onto you rather than fitting exactly and risk it being a little bit too big, you're going to take your waist measurement and subtract 7. All right, now that you have your waist measurement, we're going to start the waistband of your skirt. This waistband is worked very simple. You only really need to know 1 stitch. So you're going to start with your slip knot and insert your hook. And then we're going to chain up 9 plus 1. Now we do this because your 10th chain, which is your plus 1, actually will not count. We will be skipping that first chain. So the width of your waistband will only be 9 stitches. Now that you've finished your 10 chains, we're going to skip the first one and half double crochet into the remaining 9. I like to half double crochet for my waistband just because it works up a little faster than the single crochet. Now I'm on my last half double crochet here, and once you get to the end of the row, you're just going to chain 1 and turn. All right, now this next row is going to be worked in the back loops only. So the loop closest to you is the front loop, and the loop furthest from you is the back loop. So we're going to work into the back loop of the half double crochet for your next row. And you see me here crocheting over my tail of yarn. That's just so that I don't have to weave it in later. You can do that too if you'd like. You just have to drape your tail right over those V's and make sure it's in the middle of your stitch when you're crocheting back down the row. But like I said, now we have 9 stitches in your width of your waistband. So we're just going to half double crochet 9 stitches down. So your repeat for your waistband length is going to be chain 1, turn, and half double crochet in the back loops only for 9 stitches. You're gonna keep doing this until you reach the length of your waist minus 7, or just the length of your waist if you didn't subtract any inches. Once you reach your desired measurement, you're actually going to take your measuring tape and just check to make sure you have the proper length. Mine is folded in half right now, just because of how my camera is set up. So half of 20 inches would be 10. And this was about 44 rows of half double crochets for me. A little trick to count your rows easily: every time you see that ribbed mark, it's usually in the middle of 2 half double crochet rows. Next, you're gonna flip your waistband, chain 1, and fold it in half, just like I have, so that we can connect both ends together. This skirt will be worked in the round. So I've decided to actually just go through the side closest to me and then the side farthest from me and single crochet down that row. Now some people might slip stitch it, some people might sew it together with a tapestry needle, but I just single crochet both sides together because that's easy for me. Now, if you have accidentally skipped a stitch while doing your band, which you'll see a little bit later that I have, it's not a big deal. Just try your best to make sure that the sides match up. And when you finish the ribbing, you're next going to be starting the base of your skirt. So you're just gonna crochet into the actual band in the round. What I do is I start decreasing from the waist to my hip measurement. So before we start this step, we're gonna take your hip measurement. In order to get your hip measurement, you're gonna wrap your measuring tape around the biggest part of your waist, which is usually about the middle of your butt. Again, we're gonna do this comfortably so that your skirt fits comfortably. And this time we won't be subtracting any inches. Take the measurement as is. For reference, my hip measurement is 35 inches for this size small skirt. Row 1 is going to be your first increase row. So what that means is that you're gonna put 2 half double crochet into each row of your ribbing, all the way around your skirt. So since my ribbing has 44 rows of half double crochet, that means that this row should come out to 88 half double crochet stitches. I'm gonna crochet 88 stitches all the way around and meet you back at the end. Now the rest of the base of your skirt is made in houndstooth stitch. In order to make that stitch really pop, you're gonna need a second color. So here I'm gonna show you how to add your second color. Right before you slip stitch to the other side of your ribbing, you're going to begin the slip stitch by going into the first chain of your row. Then you're gonna pull that second color through your chain stitch. And finally, you're gonna pull that color all the way through the loop that was on your hook. And that is how you slip stitch both sides together while changing the color. Make sure you tighten everything up because this will be where your back seam of your skirt is. And in order to keep that seam straight, you definitely want to keep everything nice and tight. Now chain up 2 and turn, and we will start row 2 of your skirt. So if you don't know the houndstooth stitch, it's just basically 2 stitches you probably already know. It's the double crochet and the single crochet. So in your first stitch, and here's me trying to crochet in my tail ends again, you're going to do a double crochet in that first stitch. After your double crochet, you're going to do a single crochet in your next stitch. And that is your repeat for houndstooth. Double crochet, single crochet, double crochet, single crochet. And we're just going to do that with no increases all the way to the end of your row. Note, if you're struggling to find your first stitch to do that double crochet in, just try tightening up your threads a little bit more, because sometimes if it's too loose, you can mistake the gap right before your first stitch as your first stitch, and then you'll accidentally be slowly increasing your skirt in places that you shouldn't be. All right, we're gonna finish this row of houndstooth all the way across, and then I'll meet you back at the end. So for row 2, we're actually gonna change your color again, because alternating your colors every row is the way that you form the houndstooth look. So again, we're going to slip stitch into that first chain, but I actually want to show you something. So because you're creating that back seam, what I like to do is tuck that other color behind the chain, insert my hook into the chain, drop that color that you're working with currently, and then pull the other color through my chain. I just feel like the colors wrap a little better in the back seam, like you'll start to see this swirly effect, and then you chain up 2. But let's pause before we flip our work, because 1 row of increases isn't enough to get from your waist measurement to your hip measurement. So you need to actually alternate these rows of increase and no increase until you get to this measurement. And this is where your stitch markers come in. In order for me to get the skirt to not ruffle ahead of time and actually be a straight skirt, I chose to divide my stitch count in each increase row by 4, so that I only had 4 spots that I was increasing in. This means that if I have 88 stitches in this row, and spoiler, I actually didn't because I accidentally added 2 more, so I actually have 90 in this row, I would take that number and divide it by 4 and place a stitch marker in every few stitches of whatever that number comes out to. So if it was 88, then I would place a stitch marker every 22 stitches until I got back to the beginning of my row, but it was 90. So I still actually placed it every 22 stitches, because if you divide 90 by 4, it would still give you a number that's close to 22. However, since it comes out to 22.5, I'm actually going to round down, and this is to make sure that I don't end up with just 3 spots to increase in. I still end up with 4. So place your 4 stitch markers, and then I'll meet you back at the beginning of row 3. Now we're finally starting row 3, and an important thing about houndstooth is you cannot stack the same type of stitch on top of each other. So this first stitch right here is a single crochet, and we're gonna put a double crochet on top of it. And then the stitch next to it is a double crochet. So we're gonna put a single crochet on top of it. And just a reminder, this third row is your increase row, but you only have to increase where the stitch markers are. So for every stitch in between, it's just normal. You're doing the opposite stitch of what you did in the previous row. So finish your first section of the in-between stitches, and then I'll meet you back at your first stitch marker. Alright, so I'm just finishing my last 2 stitches here before my stitch marker. Now we're going to remove that first stitch marker after we've done 21 stitches for me in my case. And then you're going to single crochet into it just like normal since there was a double crochet underneath. But then in that same stitch, you're gonna add a double crochet. And that is how you increase in houndstooth. Now for the rest of your pattern, you actually can't just mindlessly alternate your stitches. You have to look at what stitch is underneath before you stack the next one on top. This is because where your increases are, you might have 2 double crochets next to each other or 2 single crochets next to each other. And again, we don't want to stack 2 of the same stitches on top of each other. So we're going to get to your next stitch marker and we're going to do it again before I leave you to finish your row. Now we're back at your next stitch marker. And again, you're gonna have to remove the stitch marker first. And underneath the stitch marker is a double crochet. So on top of this double crochet, you're gonna single crochet. And then in the same double crochet, you're gonna do a double crochet. And that is your increase. Now continue the row as normal. Single on top of the double crochet. Oh, you see, I stacked 2 of the same and I pulled it out. And now we gotta do that double on top of the single. And then single on top of a double. And now I'm gonna leave you to do your last 2 increases and meet you at the end of the row. So you know the drill by now for your increase repeat. You're going to slip stitch the end of your row together and change your color while you do that. And then you're going to do 1 row of no increases. So your next row should be no increases. And then the row after that, you're going to increase in 4 spots. So just repeat rows 2 and 3 until you get to your hip measurement. And then I'll meet you at the end. Here's what my skirt is looking like after I've gotten from my waist measurement to my hip measurement. And you can see I've done about 10 rows here. The first row being the increase in every stitch row, and then the houndstooth increase and no increase, alternating rows. And that has made my skirt's width long enough to fit my 35.5-inch hips. Now, as you can see, it's folded in half. So 35 divided in half would be 17.5. However, It's a little bit shorter where it comes to about 16.5 inches, but that's okay because it'll stretch. And for the next section of your skirt, you'll just be repeating your rows of houndstooth, alternating which stitch is stacked on top of the one before it until you get to your desired skirt length. Now remember, we're gonna add the ruffles, so you wanna stop before the place that you want the ruffles to fall. So if you want a mini skirt, you'll probably only do a couple more rows after this of the houndstooth stitch. If you want one that's like knee length, you'll probably end up doing the same amount that you just did, so maybe about 10 more rows. I did somewhere in between. I ended up doing 14 no increase rows just before my ruffles started, and that had my ruffles sitting about 3 to 4 inches just before my knees. So now I'll leave you to finish your skirt length and then meet you back when it's time to start the ruffles. So I'm at the end of the last houndstooth row here. And like normal, we're gonna chain up 2 and turn. And for this next row, we're actually starting the base for your ruffles because you have to crochet a row on top of another row to get the ruffles to protrude outside of your skirt. So basically you have to do a few rows of back loop only or front loop only stitches so that you can crochet on top of the seam it creates to make your ruffles. Now this next row, or row 26 for me, I'm actually gonna start the back loop only half double crochet rows. So in every stitch of this row, you're just gonna do back loop only half double crochet. Your skirt actually is double-sided until you put the ruffles on. So whether you want to do front or back loop in this row, you have to decide what side you want your skirt on. So I wanted my skirt on the side that was more light blue, whereas if I flipped it, it would look more dark blue prominently. So whichever colors you are using, decide which side of your skirt that you want to be showing when you put the ruffles on, and then know that you need that seam that happens when you do back loop or front loop crochet where the ruffles are. So if the ruffles are on the outer part of your skirt, you need to do back loop only. If the ruffles are gonna be on the side of your skirt that's on the inside right now while you're doing this row, you need to do front loop only, half double crochet. For row 27, we're just gonna do normal half double crochets with no front loop and no back loop. And basically you're gonna repeat rows 26 and 27 for however many rows of ruffles you would like. But when you're on your last row of ruffles, because for me, I only did about 3 rows of ruffles, so I repeated 28 and 29 once. And then for row 30, I half double crocheted as normal with no front loop and no back loop. And that is because I wanted my ruffles to be at the very bottom of my skirt and not have a row sitting underneath my ruffles. Once you finish the base of your ruffles, you're just going to increase in every stitch in that row. So you're gonna do 2 half double crochet in every stitch of your ruffle row, whichever one you're on. Now I've started with my very last ruffle just because that's where my yarn was connected, but I will show you how to form the ruffles on this row and then go back and show you how to connect it to the upper rows as well. But right now, I'm gonna let you go ahead and increase in every stitch in this row and then meet you back at the end. So this next row is also an increase row, except you're not going to increase in every stitch. So once you do your slip stitch into your chain, and then you chain up 2 like normal and turn, we're actually going to increase in the first stitch. So do your 2 half double crochets in your first stitch. And then we're going to increase in the second stitch. So do your 2 half double crochets there. For the third stitch, we're just gonna do 1 half double crochet. And that's gonna be your repeat. So increase, increase, no increase. And you just have to do that all the way around until you get back to the beginning of this row on your bottom ruffle. And now for your third row of your ruffle, which is your last row of your ruffle, you're just gonna do normal half double crochet till the end of the row. That's it. That's the ruffle. Once you finish that last row of half double crochet, you can just chain 1 and finally fasten off your work. So for this next ruffle, you're gonna need to reattach your yarn, and you can just do that by slipping your hook through the loop where you made that front loop only or back loop only seam, and then chain up 2 to secure it. And then you're gonna ignore the chain 2, so don't count it as a stitch, and start your row of all increases. So half double crochet once and then twice into that first stitch. And you're just gonna do that all the way around. 2 half double crochets in each loop that is a part of your back loop only or front loop only row. And that's how you're going to connect that second row of ruffles to your skirt. Once you complete that first row of your ruffle, just do everything else as normal. Then repeat for however many ruffles that you've made. Once you finish your last ruffle, you'll notice that you finally made it to the end of your skirt. But the ruffles don't look quite as uniform as they do in the video that I made. And that is because acrylic actually lets you form the ruffles yourself. So your final step in making this skirt is actually stacking and molding the ruffles in the way that you want them to lay. So I want mine kind of big. So I actually went with these large waves, and you can see me kind of sticking all of the rows together and then forming them so that all of my ruffles stayed with each other. And this is how you can truly get creative with it, like however you want your ruffles. Thin, large, separated, whichever you want. And then once you finish forming your ruffles, you just fasten everything off, weave in your ends if you want to, and then you're done with your skirt.